Thank you for joining us. Just quickly before we start, there is a disclaimer at the bottom of our presentation. Just like the PTA meeting, it will be recorded this evening. So if you do not want your face to be shown in the recording, just turn your camera off. And general Google Meet etiquette, just make sure that your mic is muted. If you have any questions or concerns, you can put them up in the chat box. We have a couple of teachers monitoring the chat box to answer parent questions. And there's also a link up there. If you could please sign in to fill out our sign-in sheet. It's just a Google form, and I just edited it, so hopefully you will not need to request access to it now. It's real basic, just your name, your child's name, and your child's teacher, please. So we're just going to go through our curriculum. It's very wordy, and Mrs. August and I are going to try our best to condense it down so as not to overwhelm you. And I'm Mrs. O'Connor, by the way. I'm one of our kindergarten teachers, and all of our other ladies are here too. So I guess we'll get started. Go ahead, Mia. Oh, thank you. Okay, so in literacy, there are different domains or objectives that we're trying to reach, and reading literature is one of them. And as I said, this is very wordy, but basically what it is that we are reading text. We're trying to read familiar, common types of text to the children, and then we're trying to pull out those key details by asking questions and teaching the children to go back into the text to find their answers. We're also identifying character setting and major events or details in our story, and this is a lot of what we're doing now with our key details. They're also learning about the author and the illustrator and the purposes of both of those. And, hold on, my screen's covering up the words on the bottom. There we go. And they're also, as best as we can, engaging in group reading activities. And usually that would take place in the classroom, and it's obviously not. So we're trying to get them involved in our small groups for ELA so that they can read together in a smaller group setting, because it's really just not practical for them to read together as a whole class right now. Reading informational, a lot of the same points are mentioned here also, but they're reading informational text. So a lot of nonfiction texts. They're doing the same thing. You want to ask and answer questions about key details. This time they're identifying the main topic and also the details that will retell or relate back to that main topic. We also want children to be able to see connections between individuals and text, events that are happening, or various pieces of information within the text. And this is where we pull in the parts of a book. So we're talking about front cover, back cover, spine, all of those details. Reading foundational skills is really what the children need to be able to read. So it's first starts as letters make words, words make sentences. You'll read your sentences on a page from left to right. We need to teach them that there are spaces between words and that the letters need to stay together to make words. But we're also talking about blending and segmenting. So beginning sounds, middle vowel sounds, final consonant sounds. And again, we're reading those emergent reader texts, and we're doing our best to get that in with our small groups so they can also read with their friends. Speaking and listening, this is the one that's probably going to be the most challenging for right now because of our virtual remote learning environment. They're doing a great job at listening, but it's also hard to get them speaking to us and each other. They can't just be in a small group where they all get to talk right now. And so we're trying our best to make sure that they all have a turn to speak, that we're rotating through them so they all can get to know each other a little bit, but also that they need to understand the rules of speaking. You take turns, you don't interrupt, and we're doing that also in small group too. Language is our handwriting and how to use language properly. So nouns and verbs, adjectives, how to make plurals, understanding and using question words. And then we'll talk about very common prepositions, and then also how to expand on our sentences. So it's not just I see a cat. We want to be able to add details and sight words to those, and that we follow language rules. We begin with a capital, there's space between our words, and we end with punctuation mark. One of the biggest things in kindergarten is phonetic spelling, and this is something that's always tricky for parents because you want words to be spelled correctly for your children, and that's not developmentally appropriate. And that's the last bullet point on here, is to be able to spell words phonetically, drawing on that letter sound relationship. So if they're sounding out, I always use the word pizza because it's an easy word to use, but it's not going to be spelled correctly. They might say, or they might write PESU or PEZU, because they're just writing the sounds that they're writing the letter for the sound that they hear. And that's a skill that we really work on a lot in kindergarten, working on building up to spelling patterns. Moving on to writing. Writing just piggybacks off of our literacy. It goes together. You can't really separate the two. A lot of what they'll read in our literacy whole group will then carry over to writing. Right now, we're trying to practice our basic handwriting letter formation and how to properly hold our pencils or our tools, but we'll also move on to compose opinion pieces and informative explanatory pieces. And we do a lot of sequencing so that they can link events together in kindergarten. It does begin as drawing, and then we move on to away from the illustrating to actually writing or labeling what they are drawing. Your turn.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mrs. August, another kindergarten teacher here, and I will be sharing our main math objectives with you. We have 5 main math strands in kindergarten. The first one is counting and cardinality, and that's what we're working on right now. Getting them to recognize and write their numbers, having them be able to count a set of objects, and by the end of kindergarten, they should be able to count out 20 objects. We work on the counting sequence with rote counting. The goal is to be able to count to 100 by the end of the year by ones and by tens. We also work on whether the number of objects in one group is greater than, less than, or equal to the number of objects in another group. We also work on comparing numbers when they are written as numerals, and then representing a number of objects with a numeral. Then we move on to operations and algebraic thinking. Don't worry, we're not doing algebra yet, but they're learning to represent addition and subtraction with objects, fingers, mental images, drawings. We act it out sometimes, verbal explanations, and then we get to equations at the end of the year. If everybody could please make sure their microphone is muted. Thank you. We also work on solving addition and subtraction word problems. So we read the word problem to them. We think about what operation we need to use to solve that. We add and subtract within 10, and fluently add and subtract within 5. And then we decompose numbers less than or equal to 10 into pairs in more than one way. So understanding that 5 could be 2 plus 3, or 5 could be 4 plus 1. And then they have to be able to find the number that makes 10 when they're given another number. So if we give them 9, they learn to say that they would need 1 more to make 10. And then at the end of the year, we move on to composing and decomposing numbers from 11 to 19. And we're really wanting them to understand that those teen numbers, it's a set of 10 plus some extra ones. As far as measurement and data goes in kindergarten, we aren't really measuring with inches or feet, but with non-standard units of measure, comparing them, which one's longer, which one's shorter, being able to put them in order, and then classifying objects into categories, being able to count how many are in each category, and then compare which one has more or less. And then geometry. And we already introduced the 2D shapes, and we'll be getting ready to introduce the 3D shapes very soon. They have to be able to tell which ones are two-dimensional and which ones are three-dimensional. They have to be able to name them and understand that a triangle is a triangle, no matter which direction it is pointing or its size. They have to be able to compare two and three-dimensional shapes, and they have to be able to model the shapes by building with components, sticks and balls of Play-Doh or marshmallows and toothpicks, and they have to be able to draw the shapes. And then finally, they have to be able to build shapes using other shapes. So understand that if they put two squares together, they have a rectangle. And that is using shapes to form larger shapes. That's the main work of kindergarten math.
All right, so now we're on to science. And one of our areas in science is physical science. So right now, that's what we're discussing. We're talking about forces and motion. We're also kind of throwing in a little bit of our five senses because we're doing the five senses in ELA. So we're trying to tie it all in together because that also makes the most sense. They're related. So forces in motion, it's very basic in kindergarten, just so they get used to the vocabulary. Our job is really to introduce them to the vocabulary so that as they go to the upper grades, they know what they're being taught because we've introduced the words. Properties and change is another part of physical science, and they're classifying objects, but also comparing objects by their physical properties. Earth science, and that would be earth systems, structures, and processes. So they're inferring that change is something that happens to many things in our environment based upon observations and also by using their senses. So we take a look at daily weather conditions. We try to do like a weather graph or note the daily changes throughout the school year. Sometimes we discuss the seasons and how this weather changes throughout the seasons. And then we also, like I said, compare the weather patterns through the seasons. Life science, which covers structures and functions of living organisms. So they'll compare different types of animals. And this is a great part where we can pull in a writing piece and they're composing a kind of a research project as at a kindergarten level. And then they can also compare characteristics of living and non-living things in terms of their structure, growth, changes, movement, and basic needs.
All right. And kindergarten social studies also has 5 main strands. The first one is history. And for kindergarten history, we're talking about change and getting them to understand that people change over time, that they change, that others change. Also, there's changes in the community, changes in our school, the impact of how life events bring changes to them. So if they get a new brother or sister, that really changes things in their house. If they have to move, if parents get a new job. And then we also talk about change over time with the seasons. We also talk about culture. And in kindergarten, that means exploring similarities in self and others. And we explore the elements of culture, how people speak, how people dress, the things that they do. And then we also do some geography and environmental literacy activities in kindergarten. We learn to use maps to locate places in the classroom, school, and home. Very simple maps. They are using globes and maps to locate land and water features. And we go over different land and water features, such as mountains, hills, rivers, lakes, roads, etc. They can identify locations in the classroom using positional words. So they can tell us that something is far away or something is near. They can tell us it's above this or beneath that. We work on explaining how people adapt to weather conditions. What do we need to do as the weather changes? And we also talk about ways that people use environmental resources to meet their basic needs and wants. Economics and financial literacy. This one we usually try to get to sometime around Christmas, but we try to get them to understand the difference between a want and a need, and help them understand how jobs help us meet those wants and needs. And this one's a tough one for the kids because what they want, they think they need. So that's something that we explore. And then civics and governance, we're really working on exemplifying positive relationships through fair play in the classroom, making friends, and we really want them to understand why rules are necessary in the classroom, at school, at home, and in their neighborhood, that the rules are there to keep us safe and to keep people happy. And I think that was all 5. I think that the guide is still available at this link. Yes, Mrs. O'Connor?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I just looked it up yesterday. So this is what I pulled up on the Cumberland County site yesterday. I'm going to copy the link that I have on my slides, and I'll put it in the chat box so that if you want to click on it, it's usually the paper copy that goes home. I don't know that it was sent home in the distribution
I don't think
material.
so.
So I'm going to put that in the chat box. If you just joined, please make sure that you go back to the chat box. Mrs. Burton has put a Google form in there. If you can just sign in that you were present tonight, that's our way of documenting. And if you have questions, I think that concludes the academic portion. So if there's any questions that you have that hopefully, oh, I'm sorry, communication. We're using Dojo and email. I think that by now, I think we're all pretty on board with that because that's the only way of us communicating. We don't have our planner. So email or Dojo for your teachers. And then I'm pretty sure that's the last thing.
And I just wanted to say to all the parents, a great big thank you for how patient and understanding you are all being as we begin this adventure together with this online learning. I know that a lot of changes have been thrown at us over the course of 5 weeks. And I know that the parents in my class have been amazing, and the other teachers are saying the same thing.
Does anybody have questions or concerns that maybe we can try and ease your mind about?
Hey, ladies.
Hey.
So my question is there any way, Miss August, that we could set a time for Grayson every day, every week for small group?
I sent them out yesterday or the day before.
Okay. It's quite confusing when things alternate with kids being in a daycare setting. So
his small groups with me should be the same.
Okay. Well, I'm also trying to navigate 3 kids at this point. So.
Right. So for my class, their ELA group is Monday through Friday. It's the same time and the same code. Their math small group, where they're only meeting once a week. Each group is meeting once a week, and he will always be, if I'm not mistaken, he's Monday. And that will always be at the same time.
Perfect. Okay. All right. We'll talk on the sides.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, you're saying what I was going to say. Go ahead, Mrs.
Okay,
Burton.
go ahead.
So there was a question in the chat box about since we are staying online till December, will the county give us our old schedule back? I don't have an answer for that. As far as we know, we've gotten the same information as you all. We just know that the board approved that we stay remote till December, the end of our first semester, and then they'll reconvene to see if we go back to school in January. We've not gotten any guidance though, as far as the schedule. So I guess for now, until we hear further, it stays the same.
Did you see the other one, ma'am, Ms. O'Connor?
Yes, and and maybe ladies, if you have a suggestion, my little Noah is frustrated with writing, and so we're trying to figure out some ways that we can kind of encourage that. And I think part of the writing is that fine motor skill. You've got to build that muscle so that it's not a struggle for him, and that can just be little things like playing with Play-Doh. Anything that's tactile that is small and he's using his hands, it's going to build that fine motor skill. So playing with Play-Doh, the pinching.
Using tweezers.
Mm-hmm.
Tweezers to pick up pom-poms, that helps build that the muscles they need for holding the pencil. And really stressing that mistakes are okay.
Yes.
They don't have to make
And
it perfect the first time.
cutting any kind of paper, any chip chopping of paper, whether, I know it's messy, but it's a great thing to just let your kids do to build that muscle tone in your hands, to build up those fine motor skills. I hope that helps.
So I don't know who was just talking, but if you need to contact me, you can contact Nicole O'Connor or Tracy August. They can give you my number. Ladies, it's fine. I have a sensory processing grader, and I have an autistic kindergartner, and I have had both teachers. And if you want some tips, you can do all day long.
Any other questions? Anything we can help you with? If nobody has any questions, I don't know that we have anything else to cover. If there's anything that you think of that we missed, just don't hesitate to email your teacher, and we will do our best to try to find the answers. This is really new for all of us. Obviously, even though we did it in the spring, this remote learning is completely different. If you have older kids enrolled in the spring, this is not what it looked like in March, April, May. So we're working through it just as all of you, and truly appreciate the parent support, because this could have been a disaster, and I think it's been okay so far. Maybe not the most ideal for everybody, but we just want to say thank you, because we really appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Thank you.
And if you have any questions, you can let us know.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
To your answers.
I'm gonna stop recording now.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton.